Okay, so this is my little classroom folder for classroom management. I really wanted to focus this on students because I'm really big into students having choices, and really not just about teaching, but about helping students become lifelong learners, and developing character and just kind of developing as people. So one of the theorists that I really kind of liked was Jim Fay and David Funk, Love and Logic. It's something that I've seen implemented within my school district back home, as well as like parenting with Love and Logic. That's something that I've seen to be really effective, so I've kind of appreciated that. It is a low control theory, which I was kind of surprised because I typically am more of a high control person, but it is focused on students having choice and taking ownership of their learning and of their behavior. And with a teacher, their role is to be a promoter of learning and a facilitator, and to demonstrate and to teach responsibility, and work as a partner with students rather than someone necessarily above the students, where the student role is to take ownership, to develop responsibility and make choices, as well as manage their own behavior and their own learning. The democratic classroom, this is something I really appreciate, just because it is, primarily because it is a really good motivator, because I believe that students can take responsibility for their learning and that they do want to, and I think that that's when they're most effective, is when we give them those choices and they have a say in their classroom, that they have a desire to learn, they have a desire to be at school and to participate in the learning. So that's the biggest reason I really appreciated democratic classroom, and that's through giving students jobs as well as choice, and giving them the opportunity. A little angry face here, just like students recognizing that when they need to take a break, and the teacher being okay with that, recognizing that students know what they need and they know most often how to respond to those needs appropriately. You know, if they need to take a step back, and that's okay with the teacher, and having that space provided for them. For motivation, ideally I do want my students to develop intrinsic motivation. And one of the ways that I liked that was in the book was to have a lesson free of grades, so students aren't just worried about the grade they're getting, but they're excited to learn because it's something that they want to learn about. And so tied with that is using what students already know to teach. So, you know, if a student's interested in football or trucks, or like my little brother was, he's super into tractors and farming, so his teachers really focused on teaching using what he already knew to build off that knowledge, and to help him develop a desire to learn. Until they develop that, though, I do believe extrinsic rewards to an extent can be effective. One thing that was done in my nephew's class was like Bingham Bucks, or his teacher's name, just using traditional words so they could earn these dollars, and they could trade them into the little store and buy Jolly Ranchers and things like that. So it may not be long term, it won't be as effective, but in the short term, for those smaller behaviors, until they kind of get the flow of like how to act in school and how to behave, it can be really effective, I believe. I think using too many extrinsic rewards can be damaging, because that's the only way they're motivated, but I think as a tool to help students develop that intrinsic motivation, I think extrinsic motivators can be effective in helping that. I don't really have a lot of rules for my class. I just kind of wanted to do 3 just basic rules, and I liked what, like Gordon B. Hinckley had, like the 6 B's, and in the scriptures there's the Beatitudes. So I just have the 3 rules: the be respectful, be prepared, and be proactive. And I really want to establish this by just having an open discussion at the beginning of the year with my students. You know, like, what does it mean to be respectful? What does proactive mean? What are goals that you have throughout the year, and how are you going to accomplish those by being proactive and by being prepared? So it's not just I as a teacher have these rules, but how do you want to use these rules to effectively learn and to be successful in the classroom. And again, so some of the positive reinforcements, like the extrinsic motivators, earning Bingham bucks, having a weekly spotlight, noticing students who were good in your class, earning free time to read or to use like technology that's available in the classroom. The negative consequences, just having private meetings with the teacher, just kind of one-on-one, losing individual privileges depending on the circumstance, and occasionally calling home or meeting with the principal. Again, just depending on the situation, and really getting to know what the student needs in each circumstance. So as far as preventative measures within my classroom, the biggest way I want to develop rapport with my students is actually something I learned with my mom. She said that she's also an educator, and she said that, you know, there's always a reason for the behavior. And that's definitely something I know to be true, in that, you know, students don't just act out just for the sake of acting out. You know, if they want attention, it's because they're not getting it somewhere else. There's always a reason for that behavior. And I think coming to understand that behavior before reacting to the situation is beneficial to students, because they understand that their teacher cares about them. And they're not just out to get them to punish them, but because they care, because they want to understand the situation and understand what the student is going through. Some of the procedures I have are just simple things like the fire drills, turning homework in, transitions between activities in the classroom. And again, these would be established just at the beginning of the year, and practice throughout the year just so students are comfortable with them. But one of the things I really like that I've seen in different classes is how they take attendance, and how they mark like hot and cold lunches. So students, on the door, there's a line with clothespins that each has a student's name on it, and every morning they come in, they take their clothespin, they put it on hot lunch or cold lunch, so the teacher easily takes attendance as well as reports the lunch, can see which students are absent. And I really like that just because it doesn't take any time away from the instruction time, so there's not any time wasted in the mornings trying to take attendance and trying to get students calmed down. So as soon as they come in, they take their attendance, they put their homework in the bin, they hang their backpacks up, and they get to work on a little daily assignment that would be on the board for them. As far as interventions go, for mild behaviors, for me that's things like blurting out the answer. The student is bored or unengaged, things like that. You know, if a student is disrupting a classroom, just honestly, I do think that most often ignoring the behavior really works, because most often, from what I've seen is substituting or working in a classroom, a lot of it is they want the teacher's attention, or they want their classmates' attention. And so just ignoring the behavior really helps students recognize that that behavior isn't appropriate, and it isn't going to be acknowledged or rewarded by giving that student attention. For the moderate behaviors, and for me this would be more like the students have a hard time preparing for class, or they're bored and unengaged, so they're not completing their assignments. And honestly, I think this really is mostly up to the teacher, where the situation may be appropriate for students to have a loss of privilege. They may need to call home, again, depending on the situation. But I think most often this is something that the teacher can prevent, because students do want to be engaged. And if they're not, I think that falls on us for the most part, you know, just keeping students engaged. If they are bored, redirecting their attention and getting them excited about what they're learning. I think it can avoid the things like the students poking each other because they're bored, or talking in class and things like that. Chronic behavior, I think it does usually start out as mild and moderate behavior, but I think it becomes chronic behavior because of how we've reacted to it as the teacher. So and this would be more like the pushing students and bullying, things like that. So I think just setting the environment so students know that that isn't acceptable. And then if it does happen, you know, really making sure that you're enforcing those rules. Bullying, you know, that's not going to be tolerated. And if they need to go see the principal, they need to call home, they need detention, you know, whatever the case may be, depending on the circumstance. I just think that it's important to be consistent, and really in those cases, I think it's important to catch that before it becomes a chronic behavior, if possible. For my classroom map, this is kind of what I had. So this is the front of the room with the teacher desk and the door up the front. Just I want the teacher to be aware of who's coming in and out of the classroom at all times, just for safety reasons and just so the teacher's aware of what's going on. I do have the students sitting in groups, sitting kind of just on the outsides of the groups, just so they can always see the board, and always have them close to each other. So ELL students, having them close to students who are bilingual, they can help them. Students who maybe can't see the board as well, I mean, having them close to the front, having students close to each other so they can discuss, because again, I want students to be responsible for their own learning, and I think that they can best do that if they have a chance to collaborate with each other and to learn from each other rather than just listening to me all the time. So I really want to focus on not necessarily group work, but group learning. And I also have a little reading corner over here because I do want students, I want to encourage them to read, and I want to have a space for them that they can kind of go sit in a chair, and just if they need to breathe, they have that space. I do have a computer table as well as a tech cart over here just to provide students again with the opportunity to take AR tests, to do research on things they're interested in, and just have those resources available to them. And then there are just some other, like a kidney table for teacher instruction during centers, and just different cupboards and storage space. But I do want this classroom open because I want this to be a warm environment where students are welcome to stand up and to move around the classroom and to be involved in their classroom, not just confined to their desk all the time. During instruction, I do want them in their desk, but the rest of the time, if I want them to be creative in their learning and to have an opportunity to learn how they need to. If they need to get up and pace it a little bit while they're thinking, I'm okay with that, and I want to provide that space for them. So that's kind of just my folder. Here's my narrative on my classroom, as well as my personal philosophy paper. Thanks for watching.